a nation of immigrants, and their fight for equal civil rights.
From 1892 to 1954, all the poor immigrants who came to the United States had to go through Ellis Island. Ellis Island was an island just outside of New York, where the immigrants got checked before they went into the country. If they were lucky, they got through Ellis Island quickly. The rich immigrants could go straight to New York. Many of the immigrants came from Europe and escaped from poverty. The most of the immigrants hoped for a better life in the United States.
By the 1700s, African people were taken from their families by slave hunters and brought to America with ships over the Atlantic. In America, they were sold as slaves at auctions to owners of plantations. Children and parents were often separated and sold to different owners, and they never saw each other again. Plantations were large farms in the southern states where they grew tobacco, cotton, or rice. Some owners believed that punishment was the best way to control the slaves, but not all planters used violence. Some believed that if the slaves were happy, they would work hard and they would not protest. The planters did not want their slaves to learn to read or write, but many did in secret. The slaves sang a lot when they worked. They often passed secret messages to escape through their songs and stories. Many slaves helped each other to plan escape. Some of them belonged to the Underground Railroad, a secret organization that gave runaway slaves food and a place to hide. If the slaves were caught, they got punished or even killed. April 1861, the awful Civil War began. Thousands of men died at both sides. At the 1st of July, 1863, the two armies met at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. The North lost 23,000 men, and the South lost 28,000 men. This was the bloodiest battle of the war. The North began retreat at 4th of July, but the war continued another 3 years. The war ended, the Union was preserved, and slavery got abolished.
After the Civil War, the African Americans who had been slaves had their freedom, but life was a daily struggle. Now they worked in North as underpaid farm laborers or as poor industrial workers. Black people had to go to their own schools, hospitals, and churches. They also had to use toilets, park benches, and lunchrooms for blacks. The Ku Klux Klan beat up or lynched blacks who did not know their place. Black and white people could use the same buses, but the black people had their section at the back of the bus. If the white section were filled up, blacks were asked to give up their seats to white people. On the 1st of December in 1955, Mrs. Rosa Parks and 3 other black passengers were asked to give up their seats. The 3 others did, but Mrs. Rosa Parks refused. She and her husband had joined organizations for better conditions for black people. The bus driver swore at her and left the bus. He came back with 2 policemen. They arrested Rosa Parks and put her in prison. After these incidents, many African Americans stayed off the buses. There were hardly any people on the buses. The black people continued to boycott the buses for 11 months. The bus company lost a lot of money. Rosa Parks and black leaders got phone calls where they were told they would be killed if they did not stop. Rosa Parks refused to pay for breaking laws of the city. Her lawyer took her case to the Supreme Court, and in November 1956, blacks could sit wherever they wished at the buses. During the 1960s, thousands of children marched with adults in the struggle for freedom. At the 2nd of May in 1963, the Children's Crusade began in Birmingham, Alabama. The children filed out of a church in Birmingham while they were singing. The police officers had surrounded the church. When the police began to arrest the children, some clapped, some laughed, some cried, and some knelt and prayed. Then a second group of children came out of the church. They also sang while they were watching their friends being arrested. Their voices became louder and louder. Then a third group of children came out of the church. The police officers called in school buses to replace the paddy wagons. Some of the children were only 6 years old. More than 500 children were arrested and sent into jail. This demonstration is one of the most important in the history of the civil rights movement.
It's many African American children at school, and is still hidden or open resumes today. It's also harder for the African American people to find jobs than for the white people. That's why we often are seeing them living in poor living conditions.